Welcome, everybody, to the show. Joining us tonight is our usual co-host and fellow traveler, Dan, the Dan Noodles man, the Alfredo Garcia of Wargaming. And joining us tonight is our very special guest is Mr. Alan Emrich. Alan, thanks so much for doing this. We really do appreciate it. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you here.
Absolutely, absolutely.
An equal pleasure and honor to be here.
Well, we are. I'm sure we are honored more, and we'll have to take it outside to determine who is honored more.
That's just a de facto response, Alan. For God's sakes, man.
Well, yeah, exactly. So,
you haven't asked the question yet. What do I know?
Well, I'm about to. I want to talk about what it's like to run the biggest wargaming design and development project in the history of wargames.
Jesus.
Well, okay, that's starting off at the top.
Might as well, because it's, if you've watched the show, you know it's all downhill from here.
Okay.
So,
you're referring, of course, to Frank Chadwick's ETO.
Indeed, I am.
So the design part is definitely Frank Chadwick. Now I'm doing in a little, with fill-in stuff to flesh out Frank's design, because there's systems and components and things that are extraneous or are beside the main thrust of the game. Frank's done the main thrust, the orders of battles, the maps, all of that, but how many garrison units should be in France in 1942? Questions like that. That's kind of, Alan, please take care of that. And Frank, I think, has a good developer in me because I can take care of that. I'm also designing, I guess, a lot of the physical systems, the order of battle cards, the game cards. I designed the unit types, the unit, the look, I mean, it'll all go to the art department and they'll have the finished say. But believe me, I'm handing the art department stuff that is finished for an amateur. I mean, it looks really good.
Well, considering the GMT's art department appears to have 200 games somewhere in the art process, I'm sure they will be grateful.
But for this project, we're not going to break GMT's back by saying we're using your art department. No, we're going to have to draft a new art department of out-of-house contractor type artists and layout, illustration layout. We're going to be on a separate track from everything else that GMT is doing because, frankly, this project is big enough to be a whole separate company's worth of resources all by itself.
That's true.
Alan, you hiring or wanting to hire, because I don't know where you're at right now, a new art department. Is this new art department familiar with war games? Your idea, what's going on in your head?
I can't say they are now because they haven't been hired yet.
Okay.
However, symbol for comma, I will be looking at artists I've worked with before and who definitely know our hobby and like that. So if they're not familiar, you should be familiar with them.
Or they will be soon.
Alan, any crossover artists from other companies? Ilya
again, we haven't hired the look.
Dan would like to volunteer as the artist.
No, I don't.
First, you get alpha and you start doing alpha, and we've been doing that.
Okay.
But now I'm trying to push the project to beta. After a big meeting with GMT, where it was agreed we're not going to publish like 5 separate monster games in 5 separate boxes that you stack together and open them up and you ferret through each box to find the pieces. We're going to make the one box to rule them all. And we're going to put all of those monster games in one huge box from which you withdraw the necessary components to do whatever front you're playing, or you put them all out on a giant table like at a game convention and play the whole shooting match. But right now I am reorganizing, trying to rejigger the scenarios to make sure, and to get to beta, which is the goal I'm currently going for now. It's to create one scenario in the Vassal kit that covers all the fronts. So I'm picking the Barbarossa scenario. So lock in the date, the third turn of June, 1941. What's it like in the Arctic? What's it like in the desert? What's it like on the Russian front? Well, we're pretty familiar with that. What's it like in the Western front? So I'm locking all of those pieces, and Frank has done the order battle research. He knows where it's musical chairs. The music stops on that turn, and everybody sits down, and he has figured out where they're sitting, and I'm diligently making setup sheets, order of battle documents, scenario docs that you can use that are really intuitive to set up the game and get it ready for play.
So, Alan, Artie, correct me if I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
Alan's project.
To you to ask for it. Go ahead.
Did I just miss something?
Pray continue. I was just making fun of you.
Okay.
Alan's project.
You're
Alan,
doing great.
are you trying? Well, trying. Is it the same thing as an Australian design group as World in Flames or World at War? What the hell is it?
World in Flames.
Yeah, I've worked on both of those.
Is that what you're trying to do? Like build a big shebang of a badang of a katang?
I did that when I worked on Portaler Krieg in Dicenso. So, and I've also worked with the evolution of the Third Reich games, and I helped Harry out on, I think it was second edition back in those days, World in Flames. So, I'm like a bee, there's a flower, and I go over and pollinate it.
Jesus, you look like you're 50 years old, but you've been around and you know all these people, and you're a history book walking.
Okay.
That is often my response to such inquiries.
I said, I want to be a historian so old I can teach from memory. So
there you go.
I'm working on it.
So how I'm just guessing that one of the things that has never been said at any point during this development process is, Frank, are you sure about this? For one thing, but because I wouldn't say that to Frank Chadwick.
I can tell you how that
just
happened.
wouldn't. Yeah,
we were at Constant World Expo, and everybody was saying, "Oh, I love the little Frank Chadwick campaigns in Russia games that Victory Point Games did. Little half quarter map, whatever they are, with 100 counters and whatnot." And they said, "But how do I link them together so I get the whole thing?" Well, that was the snowball that started rolling down the hill. Well, we could link them together, but then, you'd want more of the Russian front and have to go this way. And, and since we're putting them together anyway, you might as well put in Finland and, you could make Poland. And before you knew it, we had all of Europe in our minds. And this was myself, Frank Chadwick, and Lance McMillan, who was the developer of those games. Great guy, Lance. And we sat down at Constant World at the campfire, at night, having a cigar. And gosh, we just considered the scope of what we've been talking about and how much work it would take. And I think it was Lance who said, you'd have to be crazy to take on a project that size. And Frank says, that means we're just the guys to do it. And honestly, we've stuck with it ever since. We did Thunder in the East. That was supposed to be the beginning, but after getting all the feedback and everything else now from Thunder in the East and the systems evolution to fit a larger game, to make things work across all of Europe, some little things had to change in the East. That would happen. Like Europa. Every time you got a new Europa game, here's the errata counters for the old games. Here's the rules revisions and updates so that you're now playing. We're trying to do that all at once. So we're making all the games at once so that we only have to go through and do the rules once and the counters once and the cards once. We're doing it all so it all hooks together, and that's why you get it all in one big box. The minute you open it, you own everything. It's kitchen tested. It's ready to play. And The only thing that we'll have to deal with, hopefully, is the player errata, because players are so inventive; they always find something. So no, the 67th Infantry Corps is actually 1 hex over. You've got to anticipate some of that, but
Now,
hopefully that will be down to that when we start. When
now,
you
Alan, why would an errata of such importance happen?
Because the game is so big, it's easy to miss a small thing. And I have been focused on small things to try and make sure that you don't trip over them when you get
and I am delighted that you guys are giving this project the time and breathing space that it requires, because it's going to be humongous. I do have to inquire about the variables involved in analyzing how it's practical to get it all in one box, right? I mean, when we say box, do we mean footlocker, for example? I mean, do we mean cargo van? Do we mean freight container? That might, I mean, GMT usually gets their stuff in like a couple of different shipping containers. That's like one copy of this.
Hold on. Pretend you're a game retailer, and you've ordered a carton of games from your local wholesaler, and it's a carton of GMT games. And that carton has a dimension, right?
Yes.
It's probably 6 games, maybe 12. Standard 2-inch thick box games in a carton, right? That's what you're getting when you have a store. I used to own a store, so I know this. And that carton will probably hold 1 ETO game.
Get out of here!
I want to make sure it fits in the shipping carton, so GMT does not have.
Hold on.
Oh, this makes complete sense to me, by the way.
Pulling my leg or what?
No.
I
hope that's not your
This is basically 5 monster games in one box.
Yes.
Jesus.
So I think that sounds like a completely reasonable answer. Also, as I've mentioned a couple of times on live shows, you're probably going to gain a little bit of efficiency, at least, by not having to do things like include full marker sheets in each individual game. You can just consolidate any markers. And we did play Thunder in the East, so I have some idea of what kind of markers are involved. And there's a decent number of markers. It's not a marker-heavy game particularly. But
I believe a marker's job is to tell you how many or when. That's what a marker does. A unit tells you where and how much, and a marker says, how many. I'm affecting this guy in this way. He's disrupted. So,
I assume there was a lot of back and forth between the team and with GMT about, what do we think? Although without knowing exactly when it's getting printed, it's going to be impossible to calculate the cost accurately, right? Well, so I'm not even going to ask that question.
I'm going to ask.
Well, Dan will err on the side of it being more expensive, just so you know.
And that's what I'm trying to say. Who's the Artie? Who's the guy that busts my balls all the time on this show about raising the prices?
Hold on, let me get the list.
Oh man. Okay,
Alan. I'm not that I'm an advocate, but I spoke out once about some games being, with the amount of work that it takes to make a game, some games are underpriced. That's what I said once. So now I'm the guy who wants to raise the prices of the games.
And for the record, I agree with Dan on this point, which is not at all going to stop me from making fun of him pretty much every week for saying so.
So, Alan, if you need a guy to raise the prices of your games, it's me. But anyways...
They're not my games, GMTs. I work for a publisher now.
Dan is the chief inflation officer.
Now, look, I've been dealing with drugs. You'll get a bigger
look at it this way. The reason it's all coming out in one box is for price efficiency.
Yes, of course.
The 2 most expensive things about buying a new game are, 1, the box that it's in is really expensive as components go. And shipping to where that game has to get, also hugely expensive. So instead of doing those 2 things 6 times, we'll make them bigger and do it once, and that's where the real savings is going to come in. Look,
But
it's still going to cost probably some $100 or hundreds of dollars or whatever to buy and to ship. And so, I mean, it won't be cheap, but
No.
on the upside, you'll only need one.
Mm-hmm.
And what about expansions, man?
If you, I personally am not interested in a print and play version of this. Just to get that on the record, there is
That's
no
ridiculous.
way
Why would
I'm
you
doing
even
that.
say that? You just wasted airtime.
I'm just
We
saying.
we're blessed with a Basel guy
Mhm.
on our team. His name is Ken Keller. He's a regular feature at the Consum World Expos in Arizona, where he used to live, and he is making a Basel module with the gifts of a programmer. He is putting in features specific to our game to have it do things where you'll feel like you bought an original piece of software to play it, because it's that good now. He's really got it done. And my goal right now is to get Ken the materials he needs to take the different alpha kits that we've been using in Basel to make the one beta kit to rule them all, and put that in Basel and make it look.
Alan, you're scaring me when you say that, to rule them all. You're scaring me.
I know.
It's the biggest single wargame project that anybody's done. I'm reasonably sure.
Yeah, but it screams conspiracy.
So
when he says one ring to ruin them all. Yeah.
Well,
anyway,
what I got from Ken was, and Frank, we love rules and hate exceptions. So we always try and write the one rule to ring them all and to eliminate exceptions.
okay.
So that's our philosophy. And of course, you really can't do that. There's tons of exceptions in a game of this size and scope. But we love throwing them out and getting rid of them and saying, look, can we make this work with just a rule and no exceptions here? So we're
Artie, I wanna aggress this question and Captain Nolan's question. That's not what I'm trying to do, for God's sakes. I'm asking questions out of ignorance, and I'm learning, and then I'm saying that these guys, if they pay $10 a game, and after all that shipping and the Third World War and Somali pirates, it comes out costing $50, then I say, well, it ain't worth being a publisher. You know what I'm trying to say?
Well, that's always been true.
that's up to GMT. Doesn't have to say yes, right? So, like I said, that's kind of where I was going with the question about the back and forth on this. Is, GMT's bought into it, so cool.
GMT, and let me tell you, gentleman Gene Billingsley has been nothing but supportive. He knows his cast of characters with Frank and myself, and Jay, who's doing the playtesting, Jay Johnson, and Ken Keller working the Basel kit. He knows we are dedicated. He knows we are going to create a great game and that we will get it done. And this has been a huge project, but like eating a whale, you just take it a bite at a time. So like just before this meeting here that we're having, I was working on, well, what will be the little bug on the corner of the cards to indicate which front this card is used on, because there's 4 fronts, north, east, west, south, and then there's the combined game. So I have to create a bug that's going to work right. So as you set up a game, you can go through the cards and say, okay, this is in this game, this one's not in that game. Boom, done. So, but it was easy when it was sold separately. You bought the Thunder in the East, or you bought Decision in the West, and those all came with their own decks of cards. But now I got to push them all together, make one deck, and let you know which cards go in which front. So I'm working on it. I'm trying to make it easy for you.
Yeah. Is this an accurate report here from General Ike by any chance? That we might see some kind of game-specific storage solution that comes in the box? Because that'd be pretty cool.
When we had our conference with GMT, Frank and I, we said, I said, look, why do the Eurogamers get all the great boxes? With the storage compartments and shit. Look, if people are paying,
I usually throw those away.
Man, it's gonna have here's the dividers for the stuff that goes for each front, and then here's where we should have that. And I know a guy. I know a guy who engineers boxes like that, named Barry Pike. And if I can get him to engineer our box, it's going to be great.
Sounds cool to me.
But I mean, it sounds like expenses are wicked to create this idea.
Well, the box is just machine tooling and stuff, so that's not outrageous, especially since GMT prints in China and the labor is incredibly cheap for machine tooling things. I have
a sneaking suspicion that, of course, nobody knows. I don't think GMT knows, and I don't expect you to know exactly what the MSRP is going to be on this thing at this point, right? So a lot of what we call wild ass guessing has been done, but I wouldn't be particularly surprised if that final dollar number ends up lower than a lot of people expect, because of GMT's relationships with their printers in China and the volumes they're able to push through them.
Right. And the fact that you'll be able to buy this at the pre-publication price. I mean, if you're really in on something like this, the money you'll save on the pre-publication price, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, I would think so.
That's going to be a lot of money.
So how did you first make Frank Chadwick's acquaintance, or as we call him on this show, Mr. Chadwick?
Oh man,
I'm just saying.
That was decades ago.
Alan goes way back, man.
No, well, I mean, 86 or 5 or 4. I'd have to set the way back and keep going. But I knew Frank from working on second edition of House Divided, and then I asked him if we could take Battle for Moscow and put it in the Fire and Movement beginner's guide that we published at that time, and we just stayed friends for all that time. When he was on the Game Manufacturers Association, I think he was an officer there, and I was their very first vice president was me. And I remember him pulling me over and saying, Alan, take it easy, calm down. Everything doesn't have to get done in the next 10 minutes, I was young, I was ready to go. I was going to fix the whole game industry.
I get you, man.
And so Frank mentored me, bless his heart. And then lost track of him for some time after Fire Movement and everything. And then one day at Victory Point Games, I think I was an email, and it's the same email address that he's always had, so it must be Frank. I mean, it hasn't changed in decades. Alan, would you be interested in a small game for Victory Point Games? The original design?
It's called Europa.
No, not this one. This was the campaigns in Russia. This was the Arduous Beginning.
Mm-hmm.
The little.
I know dealers who do that.
It's just Barbarossa in the middle, toward Minsk. And Frank said that, and I gathered everyone around the Victory Point Games office together, and I said, guys, for some reason we've been hit by Thor's Thunderbolt because we're taking on a game from a designer who hasn't released a new game in quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
I figure when you met, based on that time frame, you must have met Frank when GDW was still a going concern at that point. Frank, by the way, is one of the relatively few wargame designers that I met before, like 10 years ago. I had a long conversation with him the year that Traveler of the New Era came out at Origins. Might have been Gen Con, but I think it was Origins at the time. So, Dan, you had a question.
No, I had a philosophical comment.
Oh, please, by all means. As you know, the entire audience is here for philosophy.
Yes. And I was going to say Frank. Alan. Frank pulled the old drug dealer thing on you. The first one is free. That's what he did, man. I come from the East, like East LA thing, if you're thinking, whatever.
You and Cheech and Chong, I suppose.
East LA, I'm from Canada, for God's sakes. You know what I'm saying?
You know,
Anyway.
When I was young, there was nowhere you could learn game design. You know, you had to be self-taught. There were very few people who could teach you. And I used to go on the road in the summers and go to places like Game Designers Workshop. I spent a summer at New York, SBI, where the cat that I was really allergic to, named Shazam, kept curling up to me. But be that as it may, that was the summer, man. It was really hot. But that's how I learned things. It's like, oh, here's the warehouse, there's production, here's assembly. Okay, now I'll do all that for free. I'll get my hands dirty, but show me what processes you use to make a game. What are you thinking? Where do you go to get answers to the questions? You know, and that's kind of how I learned it. I'm still not a great designer, but I'm a pretty good developer now. I can, take other people's ideas and turn them into a finished product that we can ship out the door.
Don't belittle yourself, because I was just about to say, with all the jokes, with all due respect, Alan, with all the jokes I'm making right now, you are an icon in the wargaming industry. And I'm sure you have a wicked amount of history, stories that we could sit down at a cheap bistro, have a smoked meat sandwich that you're going to pay for, and you could tell me stories all night and I don't have to say a word.
Yeah, but what happens in Tempe stays in Tempe.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
and Panzer Division Lair, turning those rules into wargamerese was not easy. I first had to get a translator, and then I had to turn the translators to English into something a little more usable, but then the game had to go out right away before I could really massage those rules. I was not a rules authority by the time Red Sun Black Cross came out.
That is a pretty obscure game nowadays. I think only wargamers of a certain vintage will even recognize the title.
Well, our story here. Let's set the Wayback Machine.
Plus, it's a Japanese game.
Right. 1986, Frank Chadwick, Battle for Moscow. Free introductory war game. And I immediately left on developing it and trying to help in any way, because I wanted to put that game as a free insert inside the Fire and Movement Beginner's Guide. So that's where I started working with Frank. Before that, Mark Miller, second edition House Divided, because Frank didn't want to be involved in that. And now that he is involved in House Divided again with the new GMT Designer Edition, that's going to be great, by the way. Everybody should buy that game. Frank explained it all to me and how he worked out events and leaders and stuff. I cannot wait to see it. I cannot wait to play it. But Battle for Moscow 2 is the progenitor of the Frank Chadwick ETO series. It's because of that little free introductory war game that ETO exists, and it's basically that game literally writ large. And same basic system,
very large.
Yeah, but it's writ very large. Well, it's writ larger than it probably would have been in the 70s, because I believe in big hexes and low stacking density.
That's fair. So, my eyes aren't getting any better.
Yes. So, I mean, it takes up more table space because the hexes you can fit your fingers in them. You don't need tweezers. And the stacking is only 3 pieces, but you'll typically have only 1 or 2.
So Alan.
I'll let Dan ask this question.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm a big fan of Victory Point games. I actually have the games that came into those little pizza boxes. I have them in Ziploc bags. So future generations, when I'm dead and my kids sell the game, hopefully they'll sell it in the Ziploc bag. But anyways, what I completely forgot what I was trying to say. Oh,
I
yeah.
think I'm planning on retiring on my copy of We Will Till the Emperor.
Oh,
Or We Must Tell the
Must
Emperor.
Kill the Emperor.
So
yeah, the designer wasn't crazy about that name, but I thought it
it's
was
super catchy title, actually.
I know. I thought it was good marketing.
So, Alan, what I'm trying to say is that that company was cute to me. I wanted to belong to it. It came in pizza boxes. It was personal, and I'm sure you felt the same way. And I never thought it would. Well, never thought it would end. You know what I'm trying to say? So, what the hell happened?
Well, every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Let me start at the beginning. Victory Point Games was founded so that the students I taught game design too, and project management and prototyping and things like that. At the college I taught at, which was the Art Institute of Los Angeles in Orange County, and I taught there for 13 years. And these students would go out, this is Southern California, of course, and they would apprentice themselves out at computer game companies who would send them back to me marked no blood. You know, they sucked it right out of them. And I would get these, I said, let's make our own little small business with the students. This is our after class project. Let's put on a show, kids. So that's what we did. And we made Victory Point Games in our attic. We sat down in a little meeting, thought of the name of the company. One of the students was doing the books, and we got manufacturing. The first games from VPG. Well, you know what they were like. And the weirdest part was we made Waterloo 20. And there it was. And it was beautiful. We made it, we folded it, we assembled it, we put it in the bag. Who's going to buy it? We need marketing. Suddenly, we realized that we were making games and we had no marketing. So, boom, we build a website, and boom, we try and put the games out there. Bless your heart, Carl. Yes. But one thing led to another. We got the company off the ground. We said we'll take anybody who's got a game design that fits this small format. Carl Paradas was just a genius. He brought in his No Retreat game, and that was only the thin end of the wedge, and it was a great first strike of his in the hobby, because he's done wonderful things since. I can't wait to see his Napoleonic game come out.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and No Retreat did start in a little Ziploc, and I'll tell you a fun story about that. When Carl put that out there, it just kind of cooked off his game design oven, and he kind of slid it out there for us to take a whiff, and we liked it, and we said, okay, we'll develop it. But there was one sticky point in the game. It was really clever. I mean, so full of clever ideas. Carl, genius. But couldn't get the mechanic that he was trying to get for, we had rolling battles where if you're stuck in a zone of control, you got to counterattack and things like that. But the system that ended up in the game was part of development, and it really worked out well. The counterattack system that's in the game, and that turned out really well. It's one of the things that I was so proud to work with Carl on. It was just genius. So that's the beginning. The middle is we grew, and everybody said, oh, well, we don't want Ziploc bags. We need boxes. So then we got the pizza boxes because we could make outside wrapper covers and then we had stacks and stacks of pizza boxes in the warehouse. It's like going to Domino's, folding up these boxes. Anyway, so that's the middle. We ended up getting our own print shop. We were essentially Avalon Hill written small.
I was gonna say.
Oh yeah.
Guerrilla Avalon Hill, as it were.
As it were. Guerrilla. Anyway, so that was kind of us. And then we grew to a point, and we had some games made, printed in China. We really were careful about Kickstarter. We tried a few things first, and then we launched big projects like Dawn of the Zeds and Nemo's War. It was fantastic. Yeah. That's second edition. I can tell because that's Vince DiNardo. He was working for us on the cover. And the artist was also in-house in those days too, so he needed a zombie for the cover.
Okay. I thought I might have known Mr. DiNardo for a second. I think it's a different Mr. DiNardo.
He's been around since Rocks and Water. We started Victory Point Games together. He's another great guy. He's retired in Michigan, and he's living a great life.
Right, he's snowed in. He doesn't ever have to leave.
No, and he's got a husky, so he's all set. But yeah, when we got really successful, it got harder to make payroll. You got to make payroll every 2 weeks. Life or death.
Expand on that. I don't understand.
You got to pay people. You got to pay employees, Dan.
I understand.
You move into a bigger place. You got to pay employees. You've got overhead, and success can kill you just as dead as failure.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. Someone had told me that too. But the thing is, Alan, is when you're saying you have to do payroll, that's management overreaching, isn't it?
No,
a lot of small companies don't have separate people for that.
We got to create the product that you want. Now, look, when it was just me and Vince DiNardo, he would manufacture the games. I gave him all the die tooling stuff and all the printed sheets, and he would assemble and fold and put things together. And I did everything else. I did the marketing, the sales, the development. I wrote all the rules. I did all the covers. That was me. Everything that wasn't Vinny actually assembling a game, by hand, folding and pressing and doing was me. And I think in 1 year I put out 26 or 7 new products in 1 year.
That's a lot.
I noticed that because I was feeling, a little exhausted. I kept that up for about 3 years, but then everybody said, no, I want boxes. And so that slowed things down. And then we moved to an office. Then we moved to a bigger factory, as it were. And everything grew, including the expenses and stuff. And, just a small business, especially in Orange County, with an outrageously high minimum wage, things like that. It was really hard to run an efficient, money-tight small business.
So what I'm picturing in my head is Alan at his desk at Victory Point Games with 17 phones, rotary phones, of course, each of which is labeled with a different department, but they all ring through to Alan. So you pick up the blue phone, you're like payroll department.
Yeah.
And you handle that, and then another phone rings marketing department.
No, actually,
facilities.
We had a staff for a lot of those things, but not anyway. Great people like Karen Wolterman and Noelle, who's since been married, but she was Le Bienvenue at the time. And we had great people. Dion, Nate, Barry, wherever you guys are, I love you.
I know them.
Now, I'm curious because you said you started with the idea that you were going to publish games by your students. Are any of those bright whippersnappers still working in the war game space?
No. All those guys, Noelle, Dion, Nate, they were all my students at one point. So they've gone on to greater adventures in the game industry. Nate is a built-in designer. He's published a lot of little games, so he's doing great. But when the growth, the expensive lessons of growing a company, printing games in China and what to do with that, and it's like it took so much longer to make a game than 2 weeks, which is what I was used to. 2 weeks to 3 weeks.
2 weeks, man.
My first look at a game, shipping it out. Okay, and here my record was 10 days when we did Tenka, which is the little Japanese Shogun kind of card game. 10 days from the time I opened the envelope to the time it went up for sale.
So, Alan, hold on. So you've got old world values in wargaming. That's where you came from.
Yes.
Did that screw you up with the new world values and in terms of marketing, production, shipping, blah 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 blah? Was all that a factor?
No, you just do what you need to do. My feet are in wargaming, but they levitate. And if I have to go do payroll now, I do payroll. I found out that I had kind of a knack for marketing a little bit. So, I mean, I'd hate to declare myself a marketing person, but I could probably fake my way through marketing pretty well without a precious, useless marketing degree.
Okay. So, Alan, here's my crux of the question is, so why did you sell Victory Point Games?
I feel like Alan has answered that already.
Because they offered enough money to buy our warehouse, our inventory, our employees, that's just a lot. And it's like, well, this is my chance to be fairly out. When the first change of presidential office happened and George Washington, gave up the office to John Adams, and the guy who John Adams beat was now his vice president, that was Thomas Jefferson. They're standing on the dais at the front of Congress, and George Washington leans over, and he had to lean over pretty far because Washington is a giant and Adams is like me. And he said, "Well, Mr. Adams, it looks like you are fairly in and I am fairly out." And at that point, I was George Washington being fairly out. So that's how big.
And I mean, okay, because I remember, excuse me, I remember seeing a couple of videos of you being quite emotional about selling that company.
Well,
You're thinking of the people watching our show, Dan.
Should I stop now?
In tears. I'm just saying.
What am
No,
I?
go ahead. Please continue.
You want me to continue?
Yes, please continue.
I want to sing a song.
Oh my God.
No, okay, Alan. What I'm trying to say is that for some reason, your company, Victory Point Games, can I call it your company? Would that be fair?
I suppose I was the face of the company.
Okay, you were the guy who took the responsibilities.
That's true. I made sure the bills got paid and everything got done on time.
So basically, you had the balls. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you got big balls. So, anyways,
couldn't have done it without everybody else, but
well,
yeah,
whatever. And the thing is that
Somebody's got to have their face on the money.
Jesus, I don't want to ask any questions which
Go ahead.
are management and employee. But what did the employee say because your company was so tight?
Well, they, including myself, stuck with the company for a while, but Tabletop Tycoon eventually lost those. It's centrifugal employment, First of all, we're working out of house. They would have preferred everybody worked in house, and that's a Tabletop Tycoon story, not a Victory.
Well, maybe we'll get the Tabletop Tycoon people on here to answer for their crimes. Dan, get to work on that after the show.
Really?
They're not crimes. They're just business decisions.
I know, but it doesn't always feel great, when those decisions get made either.
And there was a lot of sad goodbyes and regrets. And I'll tell you, little insight.
Now you're gonna break my heart. Stop it.
Being retired or semi-retired or whatever it is now, my wife and I do talk about, it was a lot better when we were making games. The one thing we really hated about making games was payroll. So I have this scheme, I guess, in mind, where it's like Hollywood movie production. You put everyone together for the one thing, and then it all breaks up. You don't keep a studio.
Is it made like this?
Gone.
That's how the video game industry largely works, as you undoubtedly know.
So yeah, that way we wouldn't have to have a factory, we wouldn't have to have employees. We'd just get together and we divvy the loot. Making money in the game industry. We divvy the loot like pirates divided treasure. You know, everybody had a certain job on the pirate ship and they would get a certain percentage of the treasure. And that was the purser's job to distribute the coin. So.
Okay, Alan, you just said something.
Actually, kind of an interesting model to put a company together. Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
Okay, Alan, you just said something. Okay,
yes,
and you being an alert, smart businessman. Can I say that?
You can, but I don't know how well it applies.
Okay,
I've been around.
So, what the fuck was I saying? Jesus Christ.
All that buildup, and now we're just left holding an empty sack.
Oh, but Alan was saying something about...
I was going to start another small game company maybe in the future.
Oh, yeah, okay. This is what I was saying. So what possessed you to start a war game company? For God's sakes, Alan, didn't you get shots in the head when you were young from your parents? I mean, seriously.
I mean, it is said to be a fabulous way to lose money, to be fair.
It is. It is a stupendous way to lose money.
Stupendous, man.
Which is why we made more than just war games and why we experimented. We're avant-garde. I mean, where do hit war games come from? You know, not mommy and daddy hit war games necessarily. They come from an inspirational flash. Something catches on. For instance, the States of Siege games, which my marketing, that's me naming things again.
I love.
Well, in those days, we were like Columbus, right? We just went around exploring things. A lot of people had been to the New World before Columbus. I mean, there's Viking shit around.
Yeah.
But when Columbus discovered it, it stuck.
Yeah.
So when we made little solitaire war games, I'm sure there had been other solitaire war games and stuff. And I'll tell you, when we did the first one, Israeli Independence, the designer, great guy, Darren Leveloff, he literally sent a bunch of 3x5 cards and a typed sheet of paper outlining the rules. That's it. Okay. I developed everything on. I made a map. I made counters. I made real cards. You know, cover. That was me. And I'll tell you, my partner, Vince DiNardo, looked at this game and says, you could play it in like 5-10 minutes. Who would buy this? This is the most terrible, ridiculous idea you've ever had.
Darren Leveloff.
Perfect. Let's publish it. And it was a hit for our company.
And now everybody's got their fingers in that particular pie. Feels like a lot of designers working in that space.
And now today, yeah, the new world is being explored. Everybody wants solitaire versions with everything now. And in those days, you know, and I'll tell you, the crescendo of solitaire play was the Barbarossa campaign when we did that, because every single system and component in that game was unlike any other war game. I couldn't crib a single thing from anything else. It was all original, and it took a lot of development to get it polished up to that state where we could release it. The Barbarossa campaign was a big hit.
Barbarossa campaign. Artie, what's he talking about? Barbarossa campaign.
Barbarossa campaign.
Oh, I remember. That was who was the designer of that? Alan.
Canadian. I'm trying.
Gary Graber.
Yeah, that's it. Gary Graber. I'm the worst with names. Gary, I love you. That was a brilliant design.
Yes.
Hope someone else picks it up. I would love to work with them on it.
Well, his name is Gary, so we know he's a genius. So I'm unsure about the timeline here, and I'm just going to ask a question. And you could tell me, no, absolutely not. That was not a consideration. Were you at all inspired in terms of kind of the way you would physically put things together in the early Victory Point Games days by the things that the cheap-ass games folks were doing?
I got a cheap ass.
You remember? Do you remember cheap ass
No.
games?
I played cheap ass. I love
Yeah.
Dr. Lucky. I mean, everybody.
Which that got its own much later fancy
and
edition.
that and US Patent 1 is just like the most ingenious design idea ever.
Well, I bought shrimping.
But we were cheap ass in our own right.
Yeah.
Fair. And I don't remember whether they were first on the scene or Victory Point was or what, because I was not paying attention to both sides of gaming at that point.
I think they were. Because they're cheap ass.
So maybe they're still around. I don't know if they're still around or not. I haven't seen them at a convention in a while. But anyway, they're not here tonight.
Well, they did Exploding Cow. That's the last game I bought from cheap ass.
Okay. I remember hearing about that. I had a couple of their things.
And the last game I bought from Victory Point Games was Paul Koenig's The Battle of the Bulge, your first 3 days or first 2 days?
Yeah, Paul Koenig's game of whatever the actual title was. It had Paul's name in it, I can tell you that.
That was my last game. And
no, that's the reason Paul
Is that the later one?
Was so predominant. Where did you have to pay him? No, that's just so I could use the name D-Day by renaming it Paul Koenig's D-Day.
Well, good for Paul. He's got a lot of prominence through that stuff. People like, it's this Paul Koenig fella. He's a young up and coming fella.
Alan.
No, he's not a young up and coming fella.
I have met Paul. I'm aware of this, that he is not any younger than me.
Yes.
Did Herman do a baseball game with you?
Oh, Herman loves baseball. Okay.
But yeah, Herman loves sports.
Here's the music.
It's because he's not a Cleveland fan.
All right. Herman's soul is connected transcendentally.
Herman is something else. He's an alien.
And he figured out the numeric beauty of like the number of players and the number of innings. And he found the essence, the harmony in his baseball game.
He's an accountant.
So, I know nothing about baseball. To me, it's 15 minutes of excitement packed into a 3.5-hour game.
Oh yeah, come on!
But Herman could see the what's what about baseball.
Absolutely.
So we published a baseball game.
Jesus, Alan, why did you sell that company? You sold dreams. You sold dreams, my friend.
We're getting sad now, Dan. Thanks so much.
Shut up, Artie. God damn it.
Fortunately, dreams are in an infinite supply. I used to teach my students, what's the value of your game? Great idea for a game? I said, stop adding zeros. You only need one. Your value for your great idea for a game is, in fact, 0. The value comes from the time and material and whatever you're envisioning, the programmers, the designers, the illustrators, all that has value.
Yes.
You could take that and a finished product to the bank and get a loan on it. But your idea, try getting a loan from your bank on your great idea for a game and watch them call security and run you out. Okay?
It's funny, Alan. You accentuate the realities of having a publishing company, being a designer, being a mentor, being just being a 16-year-old kid wanting to do your own thing again, and fucking life rears its ugly head. And I get it.
In fairness to Dan here, I have felt that way when certain other companies changed hands or whatever happened. I bet there's plenty of people that were brokenhearted when TSR got bought. So I was not particularly at that point, but
I was too sold somewhere.
Game Designers Workshop or SPI would be the obvious example, right? Because that was a traumatic. More traumatic than what happened with Victory Point Games.
Funny, Victory Point Games, Alan, with all due respect, was not as big as Avalon Hill Games, but I felt the same way when Victory Point Games for lack of a better word, kick the bucket, Alan, please, because I'm stupid. I felt like shit. Now what? That's exactly the way I felt. I swear to God. And when I saw you give a some YouTube something, you gave a speech somewhere and you were emotional. You killed me, man. You killed me.
Hey, you're making him cry. Which great mission accomplished. Thank you for coming.
You killed me,
Captain
man.
Nolan, a great idea for a game on the Battle of the Bulge. Yeah, that. Now we could all kid and say, "Oh yeah, that's never been done before." But you know what? For Victory Point games, we found the one designer who had never done a Bulge game, and his name is Joe Miranda.
Shocking.
Joe Miranda was just not doing a Battle of the Bulge game because he invents a whole new system called Bulge 20 and does the Battle of the Bulge at the Army level. And what he does is he emphasizes his military experience. He was an intelligence type officer. And so it's all about, the C4 or whatever it is, a C3, I don't know. G, that's it. That's the letter. G1, G2, G3. So when he did his Bulge 20 game, it was really clever because you needed this to move the supply and you needed that to get the air. And all of the intelligence and things had to work together. You had to suss what the other guy's trying to do victory condition wise. It was fog of war writ large.
That sounds pretty cool.
That got him to make his one and only Battle of the Bulge game.
And knowing Joe, this was all accomplished between 2:15 and 2:38 p.m.
I was going to say, so your Bulge 20 basically means 20 counters on the map.
Correct.
And you're talking about Joe Miranda here, right?
Yes, Joseph Miranda.
At the Army level, 20 counters at the Army level.
That's the whole point, right?
Well, there's not even 20 counters. There's about 12. But, you could break some down and peel off the odd division here and there. So we need a few more counters. But yeah.
I love Joe Miranda.
Oh, Joe is absolutely the nicest guy. Every time, we talk, we interact, he sends a card, a handwritten, thank you card and stuff, working with him. He is raised right. He is the most decent and intelligent person. Now, I feel bad for the person who is going to have to go through his place and archive all his notes when he passes, because
Christopher Tolkien is no longer available.
I was going to say Christopher Tolkien.
Only he could find his notes on these obscure things.
You know what, Alan? That guy's a mensch. That's what that guy is.
I'll buy that.
You're a mensch.
Joe was a delight to have on the show a while back as well.
A delight.
All right, I want to we are almost out of time, so I want to circle us back. Jesus, I am not going to be so crass as to ask about Frank Chadwick's ETO and when it will be out. But I and you can tell me I'm not ready to say that. But what I'm gonna ask is it close, not so close, or still a little ways off yet?
Well, in the last update article on ETO, I likened it to a horse race, where we have gone down the front stretch, we've rounded the clubhouse turn, we're on the back stretch at Alpha now, heading for the final turn.
Oh my God, I'm anxious.
And beta testing will be that final turn, and then we'll go finish beta test and go in the art department to the finish line.
Oh my God, you're like
we're about 3/5 of the way done, maybe more. It depends how much work I have to do rejiggering everything from 6 games down to 1.
And
that's Alan, you are a marketing genius, because I'm anxious. I don't know why, and I have to give you my money. I don't know.
Well, you'll be giving GMT your money, and Alan and Frank will be getting a cut out of it.
Gonna get his cut.
So it'll all work out. All right. So
and Jared Leveloff, who did the original Israeli independence,
among many other things.
Can we get Darren on? Can we get this guy on or what?
I bet Darren would be. I could talk to him. I think I have connection to him. So Darren,
I mean, for God's sakes, I think he's been around this guy.
Yes,
Darren is also a mensch. He's a good
I would
man.
be delighted to have Darren on the show. We'll have to talk about that after the show.
Artie, I'm gonna do it. What you do to me, get on with it, Artie. Get Darren on the show.
All right.
Before
Well,
the
I can.
I want to thank, of course, Frank Chadwick, but Thomas Prowl for taking Totaler Krieg Axis Empires Edition across the finish line, and Christopher R. Cummins for delivering such a great game. When I opened that box, I could not have been happier. I mean, my eyes were pretty damn moist.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Alan, we had Thomas on a few weeks ago as well, and they really did knock it out of the park on that.
Alan, having you just for an hour is a shame. Is a shame. Is a shame.
Okay.
And don't forget to give the special Dan rate to Dan when the pricing decisions are made.
Well, hold on. Is he talking about the weed I grew this summer, or is he talking about?
No, he's talking about for the game because the prices ought to all be higher.
Do you know where this guy lives? Because I gotta pay this guy a visit.
Apparently, yes. You must do so, and bring him a sandwich of Montreal smoked meat while you're at it, since we keep hearing about it.
You're such a beautiful person.
Thank you,
yeah. Thank you.
All right, folks. Alan, thank you so much for coming on with us tonight. It has been fantastic. We would love to have you back at some point. We could talk about, what has happened between now and then and with the project.
Don't lose my email address. I'll always be here for you.
Or whatever else.
Hold on a second. Alan, do you know about my toilet, my new toilet? Because someone just said something about toilets. I have a toilet, Alan, that because the water level of my river goes up, so my toilet floods. So you could be having a number 2 and getting a nice wash when the toilet, when the river goes up, right? So I had to get a new toilet. And just a throne, Alan, just a throne costs.
Don't get a bidet. Because if you
I got a bidet, I
it
cannot live without a bidet. What's the matter with you? What do you go get a Brazilian? Sorry.
What? All right, folks, we are officially more than out of time. I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and I would especially like to thank Mr. Alan Emrich for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Artie. Thank you.
Everybody have a great rest of the night. We'll see you all next week. Next week. Yes, next week.
It's election night, right?
Yes.
Holy shit!
Shit, it is. I forgot all about it. I mean, I wouldn't have forgotten on the day.
Christ. It's 50-50.
I didn't put the two things together. We're cutting it.